Happy Monday, everyone. It is the 4th official week of remote learning and week 2 of modern communications. Today is Monday, April 20th. I am going to go through the basics of what is on today's lesson plan before I switch gears into some of our actual learning. First thing to point out is just the Connect with Me for the week, that our next Zoom class session is for our Wednesday ModCom class. And just like last week, Bell 2 is scheduled at 10 o'clock, Bell 4 is scheduled at 11 o'clock. And if you need to flip-flop bells, that is completely fine. I wanted to show you, other than sending links in email, I have also added a document that hopefully will be helpful into your ModCom Google Classroom. So I just have something I have added that I will keep updating week by week called ModCom Weekly Zoom Class Schedule and Links. And when you open that schedule, it will have the date, what time, what bell is scheduled for that period. It's also giving you a topic of what we are going to be talking about in that class. So for Wednesday, we are going to go over some of the overview requirements and first steps of your first speech called the paper bag speech. And it will give you the direct link and ID and password information you will need to access that Zoom meeting. So hopefully keeping it all in Google Classroom will make things a little bit simpler for you guys. Speaking of checking your email, just your daily reminder to make sure you are doing that for all of your classes. Our learning goals for today, we have two. One is to determine Mariemont's most interesting 7th grader. The other one is to go over the basics of public speaking and what we will be working on in our formal speeches. So just to look at goal 1, what I have done is put together a slideshow of all of the infographic resumes that were submitted last week so we can determine who used nonverbal communication the best. So I'm going to show you that slideshow here in a second, but you're going to be able to click there in your lesson plan template, and when you are done, you're going to click here in order to vote on your top 3. So when you get into the actual Google slideshow, you will see I also linked the voting form when you are done. The order in this slideshow simply is based off of who submitted theirs in what order. It has nothing to do with last name or class or anything along those lines. So for example, the first 2 submitted were Soren and Cami. You'd be able to look through theirs, see who you felt like did a really nice job with their nonverbal communication. iPads in particular, remember you can zoom in as much as you want if you need to be able to see or read something a little bit clearer on everyone's resumes. So you can see I've got Soren and Cami's, then I move into Max and Bailey's, it goes into Malia and Hayden's, and then it continues from there. So you just want to make sure you get into that through the course of today. Oops, sorry guys. And then you want to go either into that lesson plan template or on the Google Slides itself, and you will find there is a link to a voting document. And all I'm going to ask is that you have your first and last name, basically to make sure you're not voting for yourself. And then there is just a drop down of all of the students, and you can pick who you are voting on for first place, second place, and third place. Remember, it does not matter what bell that particular student is in. Whomever you feel like did the best with their nonverbal communication. So that is your first goal of the day, along with your first step here at the bottom. The majority of today will be spent on us learning about the basics of public speaking and what you really should be working on in these speeches and what things I'm going to be looking for as well. And if we are able to get back into the classroom this year, these are some of those skills we will continue to look for. So most of this video will be me going through some of those notes, and you are going to open up the notes packet in Google Classroom, and you're going to have information you need to fill out in that notes packet. And that really is your work for today, to watch the slideshow and then submit your notes packet by 11:59 today. One reminder, even when you are done with the notes, really make sure you have actually turned them in through Google Classroom, or it's not going to come to me that you have actually done the work. So make sure you officially submit that. The other thing to point out on your lesson plan template that I will show you here in a moment is that it is really smart to split screen this video you are watching right now with all of the information I'm going to be sharing and the notes packet that you are going to be going through. That way you can be seeing the slideshow and be typing in your notes as you go. So what you will first want to do is get into your Google Classroom page to the Basics of Public Speaking notes. You will see the 2 PowerPoints I'm going to go through today are linked in here. If you needed to go back to any of them and did not want to go back in the video, you have that access. And then I made a copy of this notes packet for everyone. So you are going to open that and send it to your Google Docs. I always like to go into the print layout. And then what I would do, again, is split screen. So I just would say, let's say I'm going to go to my YouTube app. I am going to grab that app and I am going to split my screen. So you could be watching me present this at the same time as you are typing over on one side. And another recommendation as you are typing. So as you can kind of see as I go through this note sheet here, there are a lot of blanks. And those are the pieces of information you are listening for or looking for on the actual video to fill in. And that's what I'm going to be looking that you have completed when you submit this. And the easiest way to do that is to just kind of double click on exactly where you are supposed to be typing on that blank line, and then just type in whatever it is you're supposed to type in there. So if the word there is calm, I'm just going to change that blank line to whatever the word is. Some people like to keep it underlined or make it bold or make it a different color. You are welcome to do any of that if you want to make it stand out, because not only is this going to be helpful for me to see that you have watched the video and done the learning, but it's also something that is what you can come back to see that you have an understanding of that. So we're going to go through some of these basics of public speaking, and this is really going to be your work for the day. So as you maybe want to pause to get the actual notes pulled up, I am going to prepare the PowerPoints that I will be going through for you. So the first one you can see is all about this phrase called PV legs, and it's something we use in the public speaking world. And this will be some of the first notes you are going to be going through. And in the classroom, I always have students discuss at their tables what they think PV legs might mean, because it's a very weird acronym. And the basics behind PV legs are the first 3 tenets of public speaking: having poise, using your voice well, having life in your speaking, your eye contact, your gestures, and your speed. And that is what you guys are going to be filling in here in a moment. At the top of your notes packet, you see this same image. And really there are 2 things we work on in ModCom. Building a speech, which is all about how you put it together, the content, how you organize it, if you need a visual aid or not. PV legs is focused on the performance side, and that is the first set of information you are going to be filling out. So if you want to be filling in these blanks or typing these in as I go through that. So poise is a simple but also a somewhat fancy word at times even. Some of you who are dancers might have heard this term from your dance instructors. Poise is the idea that you appear calm and confident, that you avoid distracting behaviors. And that will be really important as you guys are going to be recording a lot of your speeches here at the start of the quarter. Make sure you don't have things going on in the background or in your own that can be distracting to the viewers. Your voice is making sure you are speaking every word clearly and using the right volume. In a classroom, it might be a little bit different than here performing this in your bedroom now. Having life is the L for PV legs. Having passion and emotion in your voice. Making sure it doesn't all sound like this, that you are really sleepy or really bored or really tired. You express your passion in that voice. We want to hear you have life when you speak. Eye contact, especially in the classroom, is really difficult. Not just for 7th grade speakers, but public speaking in general. So I would suggest to you as you are filming these to perhaps set up your iPad or your computer, whatever you are using, and practice first and watch your video back In what ways could you improve the quality of that so that your audience can see you a little bit better? Your next one in PV legs is gestures, your hand motions, your body. What's your face telling us? Making sure that it looks natural and not forced. If you want to hold note cards in front of you during your speeches, that is 100% fine. But making sure it's not done in a distracting way. And the last part of PV legs is your speed. Students, especially when we get nervous, we tend to talk fast. And even though I've been teaching for many years, I'm the same way. I have to really think about slowing down. You have the benefit right now of pausing and rewinding this video, but that's harder in class. So think about how quickly you are speaking in these videos. And again, since you do have the added benefit of recording these versus performing them in our classroom right now, you can always do another one. You can always retake something that didn't perhaps work as well. And that is the first set of your notes with PV legs. So on your actual notes packet, I'm just going to show you exactly where you should all be before we move into the next part. So right now you should have this first page filled out, what makes a speech effective, and everything with PV legs. So that's really, if you are following along well, that's exactly where you should be. And I'm going to transition then into the second part of public speaking, the basics of public speaking. So that is a good stopping place if you need to take a pause, but then we're going to move into this second part. Okay, for the second part of our basics of public speaking, I always pull up this goofy little image here because many of you even mention this in your flip grids, that you have a lot of nerves of presenting, whether it's in a video your classmates are watching or in the classroom. I totally understand that nerves are there. And ModCom is not about making you professional, motivational speakers. It is about getting more and more comfortable when you do have to present in front of a group. And that's all we want to work on, improvement. So your first set of blanks you can see up here now. The overall importance of public speaking. Letter A, you may not realize it, but you already spend at least 30% of the hours you're awake talking to another person, about 4.8 hours a day. It actually is probably a little bit less these days since you are stuck at home more and more isolated, but on average, that is where we are. Letter B, almost all of you are going to be involved in public speaking in some form at some point in your lives. So like I mentioned before, ModCom is about preparing you to do a good job, whether it's a small boardroom of colleagues, a classroom of high school or college students, whatever that might be, we just want you to be prepared. Letter C, employers even rank public speaking and related communication skills as the top skills they look for in their employees. Yes, they want you to be successful with your grades, but they want you to be able to communicate. And that is a huge part of what we want to do this quarter. The next part we're going to move into is the communication process. And there are 4 parts of this communication process that you will work on this quarter. You will obviously be the speaker. Every time you give a speech, you are the person doing the talking. You get to make the choices, how you want to send an appropriate message. How you want to be viewed by your audience is your choice when you are the speaker. Letter B is extremely important as the speaker. What's your message of the speech? Is your message for your audience to get to know you? Is your message to persuade your audience to do or not do something? But you need to know your message, which is your ideas and thoughts encoded into words. And it should be really clear for your audience to understand your message. The second 2 parts of the communication process are both the listener and feedback. And in our course, these 2 are just as important as being the speaker. Every time you give a speech, you give one, but you listen to all of your other classmates' speeches. You receive the message, you make meaning out of it. And most importantly is the feedback you give each other. which is really why we're attempting our speeches in Flipgrid for the first time. I want you to be able to see each other's speeches, and I want you to be able to give each other feedback. We do not improve as writers if we don't get feedback. We do not improve as speakers if we don't get feedback from our audience. What works, what doesn't work? Are we looking in a weird place? Are we speaking too quickly? Are our verbal fillers too overwhelming? So when you give head nods and ask questions or look confused, you give feedback. For Flipgrid, you will be filming video feedback for your classmates to see. When we think of the format of a speech, you will have it similar in ways to an essay you do in language arts. You will first have an introduction with every formal speech you give. Begin with something to get the attention of your audience, whether it's a startling statement, a question, maybe a quotation. All of those are acceptable. In your speeches, it's fine to start with a question. It's fine to use first person and second person. I know you aren't allowed to do that in your language arts essays, but in your speeches, it's absolutely acceptable. So think of those ways to do your introduction. When it comes to the body of your speeches, just like the body of your essays are different, so are your speeches. The length of a speech will depend upon each speech and its requirements. Some speeches require research. Some of them you come up with the ideas all on your own, completely independent of research. The first speech we will start with next week, the paper bag speech, does not require you to do outside research. The last part of the format of your speech is the conclusion. This is the most skipped part of a formal speech, especially for 7th grade students. You get really excited to be done, and you forget that you need to actually wrap it up properly. Just like you have to have an actual introduction, you want to leave your audience with something to think about. People will remember best what you say last. This might be a restatement of your most important information. Remind them of those points you made. This could also be a place to use a powerful quote or song lyric. Maybe you have a story that connects with your entire speech. Maybe there's a personal experience, but you want to wrap it up in a way that will get the audience to feel what you want them to feel. You do not just want to say things like, "Thank you, I'm done," or "Thanks for listening to my speech." Certainly not the end. So you will have a planned out conclusion for your formal speeches. Speaking skills that we want to be working on. Obviously, those things I went over with PV legs, those are certainly important. Other aspects, particularly when you are recording these speeches, whether it is in Flipgrid or a different program, think about the following aspects. Think about the background. Is it going to be distracting to your audience? Is there some way you need to move your camera angle that we can see you better? Maybe you need to raise or lower your device. Maybe you need to have it further away so we can see more of you than just your face close up. I would consider having someone else in your household record you so you have a live audience and you can feel that a little bit more. But you definitely want to think about both of those now that we are recording our speeches for our first few weeks of ModCom. You also want to think about these next items in your speaking. Verbal fillers, or basically your clarity. We want to really work on avoiding words like like, so, yeah. Those can be really distracting to your audience. We want to make sure we are very clear. And part of that is being prepared, so we know what to say and we don't need those awkward pauses in our speaking. You want to think about your posture. In the classroom, you certainly would, and you want to think about that while you're filming yourself as well. For your introductions on Flipgrid, it was fine if you were laying on your bed, if you were sitting on the couch. For your formal speeches, that's not how we want to record them. I would consider standing just like you would in the classroom. Make it feel formal. And because you have a huge benefit of getting to record and retry these, watch yours back, re-record it if necessary. Use that benefit of our remote learning to your advantage right now. Last few slides deal with stage fright. 2 separate studies have found what most of us already knew. People are afraid to speak in public. One has found that 40% of people claim it's their biggest fear. Another study found up to 70% of people. So the idea is you are not alone. But I don't want you to keep that stage fright at all times. I want you to work your way through your nerves so when you're in situations of public speaking, you feel more comfortable. Realize, first of all, that your audience doesn't see your nervousness. It's typically invisible. You just seem to be calmly presenting your speech. Also know that mistakes will happen, especially as a 7th grade speaker. Most of the time, your audience doesn't realize your mistakes unless you point it out and draw attention to it. So unless you say things like, oh, I forgot my introduction. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say it in that order. Your audience typically doesn't know. So just move forward. As listeners, whether we are in class or whether we are viewing our classmates' speeches, we want to make sure we're not judging a person by his or her speech. Especially right now, we do not know the home situation everyone has going on. I have my 4-year-old daughter waiting for me in the restroom right now. We don't always know what's happening, so we make sure we don't judge someone based upon their speech. And we always try to understand them from their point of view, even if we disagree, especially if we get to do the argumentative speech. You likely won't agree with all of your classmates, but we still understand their point of view. Next one, share your thoughts with the speaker and be specific. So when you guys end up doing feedback in Flipgrid, make sure you're constructive to each other and you're not destructive. You want to comment on the speech, not the speaker. So I'm not going to say, wow, Julia, I really liked your sweatshirt. That's not helpful to her as a speaker. If I tell her, I loved your introduction, Julia, but I think you could have a stronger conclusion next time, that is something that will help her actually improve. And that's what I want you to think about when you give feedback to each other's Flipgrid speeches. And most importantly, as I wrap up, remember you're not a professional. I don't expect you to be one. I just expect your absolute best. At this point, probably involving a lot of pausing, you hopefully have all of your blanks filled in your notes packet. And if you are to the point where you have everything filled in and you don't need to go back to anything, I would wrap up the notes and make sure you formally submit them through Google Classroom. I am hopeful that I see all of you in our Wednesday Zoom meeting where we will talk about your very first speech, the paper bag speech. Otherwise, have a fantastic